Savvy Business Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with our host, Christina Nichman.
Today we're joined on Savvy Business Radio by Hilarie T. Gamm, sharing her enlightening new book, Billions Lost, The American Tech Crisis and the Roadmap to Change. Get your very own copy today of Billions Lost at BillionsLostBook.com. Hi, Hilarie. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on your show.
You betcha. I was very blessed that we were introduced and that you are going to share your wonderful new book, Billions Lost, The American Tech Crisis and the Roadmap to Change. I did not know prior to my own working experience, we spoke before the interview, that I consult. And there are some tech companies I've worked for that are often not hiring Americans. They're hiring from all over the planet, which is wonderful. But my thought in my head is like, well, they don't have Americans that can do these jobs. And so you've come to realize through the writing of your book and your research that there is a problem. There is a crisis in our tech industry in the United States. And you're going to go through all of that, share a little bit of your history and the research you've done in this area. Before we go there, share with our audience a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you so much for giving me that wonderful intro. So, yes, I have actually worked in the technology industry for over 25 years. So not only did I do the research for the book, but I've lived the book. I work in the industry and know full well, better than anyone, how we've been outsourcing our jobs to people outside the U.S. and to captive labor markets outside the U.S. And the reason I wrote the book was because many of my peers were calling me for job references and needing assistance trying to basically get a new position. And I was called upon so often, I realized it was basically an epidemic in terms of how many jobs were being sent out of the U.S. that are technology related.
And, well, you know, there's a lot of reasons for this. I am not in technology, but I am in a very specialized field. And what's interesting is I think bigger corporations have started to feel over the years that, hey, we can just outsource. It's more economical for us. But me being a consultant, going into these companies and seeing how things put together, because I just see all the bits and see what's not working. And often where you think you're saving money on the front end, you're actually losing money and clients in the back end by having someone who's not connected to your product or service or company in some remote office in some other country. Now, I'm glad they're getting a job, but if they're not connected and they don't speak the language that well, and then your invoices are in the United States, in New York City or wherever, and they're in Pakistan, how well can they really serve your clients? What has been your experience in the whole outsourcing and technology?
Well, you bring up some great points. So the first one you talked about was how really, truly uneconomical it is when you have American-based companies and American-based consumers who are being served by individuals in a foreign country, perhaps that don't speak the language that well and perhaps don't really understand the business processes well. And so I would agree with you that there is an opportunity there where Americans doing those same kinds of positions might potentially make a higher hourly wage, but their output would be of higher quality and their output would probably also be of a higher quantity. So when we look at technology as an industry, there's several different kinds of job categories that fall into that tech industry. There's people that are doing testing, there are people doing coding, there are people who are doing architecting and designing. And so those people who have to be closest to the business, typically it is far better for a company, even if their cost per hour is higher for someone within the United States who speaks English fluently, has been educated in the United States, and who understands the business practices in the United States, to take that kind of position rather than someone in a foreign land. And basically it's just a question of, output and the ability to get the work done quickly and in a quality and timely fashion. And many times our tech leaders, both within the tech industry and in every other industry, are sometimes very short-sighted. because they're just looking at an hourly wage and they're thinking, oh, this person in a foreign land is so much less expensive than their American counterpart. But in reality, the American actually produces a far better quality output and typically is worth the extra dollars.
It makes sense to me. And I've I'm not started, but I have witnessed this over the years. And even me personally, I have a couple of tech components I use either on my computer or for work life that are very necessary. And times where I need help as a consumer, I'll call and I'll get someone in a country that I'll have trouble understanding, and I'll tell them what I need. And I'm on the phone for like an hour and we still haven't resolved the problem. Now, they might be very nice and trying to help me, but I'm a very frustrated customer thinking I should not do business with this place anymore. I need to find another company to do business with. So even if this is just cost bottom line as far as thinking about the employees, you need to think about, well, your customers are very important. Are your customers going to be served in a fashion that you're okay with, given the proper customer care that you desire?
Exactly. And the other piece is like the process. So we were talking before we got on the interview today, and you were explaining to me that many times the foreign workers who you're interacting with simply don't understand the process. They just don't understand the protocol. And simple protocols, day-to-day standard working protocols are lost on individuals who are not from the state. And so it's a far longer time to train them, a far longer time to get them up to speed, and many times the quality of output never meets the quality of output you could gain from hiring an American.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we talked also, because a lot of the people that listen in aren't huge businesses. They're a smaller business. And one of the things I've heard from these smaller businesses is, I would love to hire an American, but I'm on a very fixed, limited amount that I could spend on an employee. And with the cost of, to hire an employee in the United States, I just can't do it. What is your take on that?
Well, as I indicated earlier, I had written an article for Entrepreneur Magazine, which talked about several of the various different systems and benefits of using the online technology that's available today to hire temp labor. So like the Upworks and the Fevers of the world, where you're able to hire remotely and virtually temp labor to do a variety of jobs. And one of the examples I had given was that within the Upwork paradigm, you can actually specify if you want someone only in the United States. And then you can hire just people here in the U.S. And what I suggest to those who are on a budget is, rather than hire people to do a work hourly, they just come up with a fixed cost that they think is reasonable and see the quantity and the quality of folks that you will have applying for those opportunities working as a fixed cost. I think that people are often surprised the caliber of individuals they're able to hire virtually today.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what I've found is that often you don't need this kind of help. It depends on what it is. We've done some live events in Manhattan. Now, we're not doing them every week, so we don't need a whole full crew to be doing that type of function of getting an event in Manhattan up and going. But when we do, then we can hire someone as an as-need basis for a particular project. We could go on, is it Upwork, you said?
Yeah, Upwork. Yeah.
Upwork. We could go to Upwork and say, for this particular project, we need a person to help us in the United States, and get them for that project and put the money aside for that project, because we're not going to need this kind of help all the time. And I think when you're a small business owner, you can hire vendors. And I found a lot of great vendors in and around, my local area, even in New York, neighbors and such who are, some of them are retired and could use the extra income. And they're like, okay, I'll help you with this. I'll help you with that. So I found that I've taken a lot off my plate just by looking around, talking to neighbors and friends. Oh, I know someone who's doing that. They're out right now on maternity leave, but they could use the extra income. So you can find work sometimes in ways you wouldn't necessarily think to find it, not going through an agency perhaps, but, just putting the feelers out there.
Yes, exactly. And when you're innovative and you're thinking out of the box, you come up with the very best solutions to your issues. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
people on maternity leave, someone on short-term disability who's ready to go back, someone who's, recently retired. All of those folks, potentially when you have a local gig, are folks that would be interested and ready to be hired. And even our teenagers today and our college students, many of them are looking for temp labor. So I think they're all really good temp labor pools, and they're available all over the country.
Absolutely. And now we also talked, and here's a really big issue that your book hits on that I think we really need to get the listeners to understand, is that this is a crisis of huge magnitude. And it just isn't the fact that we're, outsourcing work, but that we're not even training future generations to be up and going in technology, to really have a handle on it, so that, in the future that we can actually think to hire Americans. Share a little bit about your research in that area.
Well, one of the things that's important, I think, for your listeners to understand is that today American universities are educating more foreign students in the STEM majors, particularly in computer science and technology, than they are American students. When you look at the PhD programs of America's finest technology universities, there is very few students who are actually American. And that's really scary, right? Because we have technology, and technology runs our lives and is in everyone's hands, and people use it, all day long to do all sorts of things. And to think that we're not going to have our own labor source within the confines of our country who know how to work the technology and innovate and advance it, it's a little bit scary. And it all has to do with critical mass. So if there's only one or two places where, you really need technology folks who understand the ins and outs of technology, you probably would have enough. But when you look at every industry across the U.S., you look at transportation, you look at aeronautics, you look at financial services, you look at health insurance, you look at providers who provide health care, you look at the financial systems, you look at even grocery stores, retail. Every single industry in the U.S. uses technology. So that means if we were training enough technology folks here in the U.S., there'd be an abundance of jobs, abundance of opportunities, and lots of upward mobility. Instead, what's happened over the past 25 years is that our country, for a variety of reasons, which I explain in the book, in the 1990s chose to open the door to a foreign labor source. And that never happened in any other time or place in American history. And because they did that, they created a dependence on foreign labor, specifically in the area of technology. And in addition to that, the impetus or the reason to educate our own American children was forgone. And so if we were only hiring American, or if we were hiring a majority of Americans, we would have all the tech giants and all the companies across the U.S. crying for better education when it comes to technology. But because they can give those jobs to folks outside the U.S., there is no impetus in our education system to really get people up and running with the technology and understanding the fundamentals.
Wow. So really one has affected the other. The idea of, we have the option to hire abroad, and maybe even for less money, has said, well, then why even educate, or why even use Americans? And it's become a vicious cycle. How do we even get it to the point where we begin to even build interest in American children in high school or in college to even be interested in going into a technology industry job?
Well, it's great that you bring that up. One of the things I pointed out in the book, and which is very sad and very disturbing, as you're a female who's interviewing me, is that women in technology in the 1990s were over 25% of the tech labor force at that time. Wow. And we've been on a steady decline, and we're less than 10% now. So American women make up less than 10% of the tech jobs in the U.S. So that's over a 15% decline in 25 years. There's less females going into tech education. And all of this stems from a variety, again, multiple reasons. Yeah. But one of the most critical reasons is the lack of role modeling. So when you have children who are part of a family where their parents are being laid off, or their uncle's being laid off, or their job is outsourced, or their mom's early retired. That's not a profession that that child or those children in that family would probably lean towards, because the end result isn't positive. When you see families where both parents are doctors, or one of the mom or the dad is a lawyer, or one of them works on Wall Street, or one of them works in retail, or one of them works in design, and they were able to support a family and live a nice lifestyle and have enough income and job security to last a lifetime, those children will tend to study and follow in their parents' footsteps. And so what happens when we basically outsource and early retire and push people out of the technology field at the age of 50 or 45 in some cases, and what happens when people are laid off after they've spent loads of money on their college education or graduate education, and then they're replaced by foreign workers, the children and the neighbors and the community around those people recognize that that might not be the best profession to move into. And so the glamour and the opportunity to educate America's youth to do those jobs is not as powerful anymore. So that's a very important component. The other very important component is, you know, K through 12 education in the United States does a really great job of educating our children how to read, how to write, but not such a good job on the fundamentals of technology. And so when we think about how pervasive technology is today in the U.S. and really globally, it makes sense to think about changes in our public education system. So that we're not just teaching children how to type into a computer, but we're actually teaching them coding, you know, and technology and coding and programming and architecting, it's parallel to learning the English language. So we could teach children in K through 12 the building blocks, and then maybe in middle school they could learn how to code a little bit more, and then maybe by high school they could actually learn how to, you know, code in some more advanced languages. And then whether they choose to do technology or not as a profession, at least they're literate. They're digitally literate. And that's what we need.
I love that, what you just said there. It's funny. I'm a kid of the 80s, and the Apple computer was the first to hit the market there. And I remember that in school, we were taught simple coding, because in those days, to make the computer even make a line on the paper, you had to give it directions on how to do that. And so there was simple coding involved. And I remember being in the class as a kid going, why am I doing this? You can't use this for anything. No one's ever going to have a computer in their house. So why are we doing this? But I'm glad I am doing it now. I'm not as threatened by technology. My partner also likes to just build computers, which sounds really complicated, but we don't build the components in the backyard. You get all the bits already made, and you basically just put it together. But what's interesting, I hear people say, Hilarie, that they couldn't live without their iPhone or computer. They would die. But if something goes wrong, they just go out and buy a new one. And I'm like, if you had the capability of understanding that it's not this crazy alien thing, that you could actually learn to understand it, then when something goes wrong, you would troubleshoot, fix it, and keep going.
Exactly. And that's where, as a nation, we need to be, because think about what would happen. You know, there's lots of gloom and doom in the news and in the press. And think about what would happen if we had a country full of people who really understood the technology. Then, our Congress people would be able to ask intelligent questions and really understand the risks associated, let's say, with social media. Or, we would have our folks that are responsible for determining what makes sense from a legislative perspective in terms of making sure our electric grid stays up. They would understand what to ask, they would understand what to look for, and they would be able to create protocols that protect us as a nation and a citizen.
No, I love that. And that recalls for me what I was just seeing recently, the questions asked of Mark Zuckerberg. And some of it made me cringe because I was amazed that people, I'm not very techie. I really am not. I might be slightly better than, maybe slightly better than some people. But I was cringing that some of them didn't seem to have a handle on what technology is and what his platform does. I'm like, how could you even invite him in and tell him we're going to interrogate you here, but we're not going to know about what your technology does and what any of these social platforms do? I'm like, what are you doing up there?
I think a lot of people probably shared your perspective on that at the time. So I don't think you were the only one who probably was thinking that at the time.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on. I'd really, really like to see it being made fun for people, that this isn't something that we have to be scared of, that it could actually be fun. And my partner, as I was saying before, he likes to just build computers for fun. Let me see what I can make this computer do, how much memory I can make out of it, And at first I thought, well, why are you doing that when you just go to Dell and buy one? But seeing him build them and, put the idea of I can build a computer desk or whatever, you're having fun with technology and making it part of your life. And you don't have to go out and make that your career, but it can still be fun.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that engaging the children of the U.S. to embrace technology in the same way as your partner does, I think it's kind of one of the goals that we need to have as a nation. We need kids to go back to innovating. One of the great foundations of the United States of America was when the country was coming together, and education wasn't necessarily mandatory in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
There was lots of discussion about what was important and critical. And one of the things that they felt was critically important was to give folks time, give students time to reflect. And think about the lives of Americans today, specifically children. They're never given time to reflect, right? They're always giving time where they're being distracted. So it's a very different paradigm than it was 150, 200 years ago. And unfortunately, what that does is it basically extracts all the creative juices and all the creative opportunity from the youth of today. Because in order to be creative, you have to have some downtime. You have to have some time to reflect, and you have to have some time to be creative and innovate. So if the United States of America is going to maintain the leadership role from a global perspective it has historically to innovate and bring new things to the forefront that make life and life on the planet Earth better, we need to give our children an opportunity to experiment, to learn, to reflect, and to innovate. And if we continue to do that, then we'll be able to stay ahead of the game globally.
Wow. You just brought up so much I hadn't thought about, but how it is so important. I'm thinking from an adult perspective here. I am middle-aged now, and I consult a number of companies. And when I go there, it's amazing how much of the workforce, whether they're in their 20s or 30s, how much of the workforce in the United States really focuses on not innovation and come in here, don't have a life. I don't want to hear about your life. Just come here, sit at a desk and punch numbers all day long. And I'm thinking to myself, but you could get so much more out of your folks if you allowed them to create, if you allowed them to use their creativity, their innovation, their creativity to work through the problems instead of saying, you shouldn't have a life outside of here. I was sitting at an office recently, Hilarie, I kid you not, we were talking about how we could build the bottom line and what are some issues and processes and stuff like that. And one of the top bosses said, well, we just need to stop our folks from going to the gym and to having the playtime and just get in the office and work. So, she actually slammed her hand on the desk or on the boardroom and told everyone, freak the gym in the morning, get your butts in here first, do the gym on your time at the end of the night, but we need to get things pumping. Her idea of fixing problems was to work longer and harder. And I'm like, that hasn't been working. We need to not do the same thing over and over again, doing it harder. We need to do things smarter.
And you know what? If you have an opportunity to go back to that executive leader, give them some articles about Japan. The country of Japan is a perfect example of what you just described. The country of Japan's workers are the least productive on the planet. They work the longest hours and produce the least.
Wow.
And so there's a perfect example for you can find numerous articles on that. But that's actually a problem that's endemic in the country of Japan. And there's been numerous articles written about how they're trying to they actually force their workers to leave at night because they're trying to get their workforce to be more productive. So in actuality, you're 100% right. Taking a step back, and interestingly, the quality paradigms that came out of the Deming and total quality management, which had to do with Japanese automaking, had to do, again, Six Sigma, where you're trying to refine processes and make them better.
Yeah.
That kind of thinking, coupled with American ingenuity, take a step back, let's think about this. How could we totally change what's going on here and make this move a lot faster, a lot smoother? That's where you get the most bang for the buck. That's where you see companies really gain competitive advantage.
Yeah.
But again, refer that executive to some of the work that's been done and the studies been done in Japan about the least productive individuals on the planet and how that workforce and the leaders in Japan are trying to figure out how to get their folks to work less so the time they are working is that much more productive.
Wow. Well, I'm certainly going to do that. It's a great idea. And one thing I've seen, even when I went to school, I remember we had an hour recess and little breaks throughout the day. I now hear my friends who have children say there's almost no downtime, like you were mentioning, for our kids. They put them on a completely activity-based, nonstop, one after another activity-based thing. Even when they call it gym or something, it's like, boom, 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 gym. Okay, run over here and do this. No, run over there and do that. I'm like, okay, dude, do they get to breathe? But see, none of that allows you to really, as you said, have downtime and really reflect on what am I getting out of this? How is this inspiring me? Can I do this better? So yeah, I could totally see this. We need to bring back more recreation in school and art. And
what's interesting, I'm not sure if you want to read the chapter I wrote, K through 12, the chapter on early education.
Yeah.
A perfect example for you to, lend credence to what you just described. In today's elementary schools, the children are learned good hand washing. They're learned to wash their hands to prevent the spread of germs and to prevent the spread of flu and cold. But in today's elementary schools across the nation, they're not given the time to wash their hands.
Wow.
Instead, they're given a squirt of antibacterial gel. And the children are no longer allowed to wash their hands with soap and water and dry them with a paper towel like they were in generations past. Yeah. And that's because they don't have enough quote-unquote time to actually wash their hands.
That's great.
That's a very universal, and everyone understands, hand washing. Yeah. That's a very universal story that every American can relate to, and every American should feel a little bit sad and worried about that our nation's children, our nation's 5-year-olds, are not given adequate time to wash their hands before they eat their lunch.
Yeah, and what's worrisome to me is how can you say there's not enough time to wash your hand, for heaven's seriously? And it's one. We had a woman come on 2 years ago who works for a green company, and she said, I was really into protecting against germs and whatever, and I only use organic materials, but I do use antibacterial soaps. And she said, can I tell you a story? And I said, oh, okay. And so she told me that her daughter almost died because she was using antibacterial soaps and she was a baby. And it kills everything on your skin, the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. And that's one thing we don't think about, that there's some bacteria on your skin you want to stay there that protects you. And these antibacterial soaps are killing everything. So when she got this skin bacteria, it almost killed her. She was in the hospital. She had several surgeries, and she's like, I did not realize I was hurting my child with those soaps. When I could have just had them come in and wash them with some soap, some regular soap and water. I thought I'll just squirt some of this stuff and I'll keep her safer, but she was actually making it more, more dangerous for a child's health. Yeah.
Yeah. So she, her, I've heard that before. Sorry to hear that. I hope her daughter is okay, and I hope your listeners, when she told that story, I got the benefit of her experience, although it was a scary one.
Yeah. Her daughter is fine now, but yeah, I'm so grateful she shared that. And also, your book outlines that again, that, if we cannot make time even for washing our hands, and this goes for all of us in all parts of our lives. I myself have said, I don't have time to go, relax and have a cup of coffee and chill for 5 seconds. If we all say that, what is happening to our family life, not just our tech life, but our children's life? We're growing up in a harried mess of, stress, because this constant moving and we have to do this, that, and the other is dangerous for our health. So I really do hope that everyone listening today begins to reflect on a lot of the things we talked about, and that we can all start to make a change. One, read your book, and then start to really ask for policy changes and for changes in our educational system. And what are some ways that you want someone to get started today? If they're listening in, you had one piece of advice that you could give to parents or business owners.
Well, a couple things. I would say first, if anyone's interested, they want to keep, up to date in the technology and what I've written about, and, really things of, potential concern. They can go to my website, or they can go to join the Twitter. They can follow on Twitter, because I do try to post relevant articles daily. On the back of the book is Billions Lost, the American Tech Crisis and the Roadmap to Change. The Roadmap to Change consists of 20 actionable ideas that I think we can embrace as a nation. And I'm hoping that some of your listeners read those and go to their congressmen or women or their senators and ask for some simple actions. I think the very simplest and easiest thing that I sincerely hope that we get our leaders to come on board with is just knowing and asking every American company that's paying taxes how many foreign laborers they're hiring. Because today we're not capturing that. So we have, some American corporations that openly admit they're hiring more foreign workers today than they ever have been before, and more foreign workers than American workers. But I think it's really important for us as a nation to look at these various different industries in the U.S. and these American corporations that are trying to turn a profit, and get a sense, at least at a very minimum, for how many jobs have actually left the shores of the U.S. to a foreign labor force.
Yeah.
I think that's the very first thing we need to do, is just get a handle on really how truly huge this issue is. But my estimation is millions and millions of jobs have left the U.S. And with that goes all of the economic benefits associated with the salaries and all of the income that would be spent here in the U.S. for all the various consumer goods and everything else that we consume as individuals living in a country. Yeah. So it's a huge, huge loss, trillions and trillions of dollars. And the biggest industry in the world today, globally, technology, that the U.S. has lost.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what I like about your first top priority suggestion on how people can get started is you can't begin to fix a problem until you can see it fully. And when you have the metric of going out there and now gauging how many people each company is hiring out off the United States shores, this gives us a starting point of, okay, here's what the problem is. We can see it. We've measured it. Now what's next? But it's a first starting point.
Yes, yep, exactly. I have lots of other really great ideas in there, I think, that I've got a lot of positive feedback on, some about taxation, a lot about education, and many others about how to re-engage our technology workers, how to re-engage women in the workforce, and how to enable Americans to be given the first shot at working remotely. You have lots of companies in the U.S. today that hire remote workers outside the U.S. I think there's a huge untapped labor market of all different folks that would love to be able to work part-time from home remotely, and probably would be willing to do it for a lot less wage than current full-time employees in the same positions. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in the U.S. to hire many more people than we're currently employing today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that point because actually that's one point I've been dealing with some of my consulting clients, getting them to understand that there's an option. And a lot of them are like, well, I want to see my workers to know I'm getting my dollar. I'm like, dude, you know you're getting your dollar if you get results. If you don't get results, you fire them. But no, I mean, I know when people can not be stressed about, hey, getting home for the kid who they don't have a babysitter for, but hey, are totally able to work while they're at school. This gives them the option, and that way they could be home when they get home from school, and this gives you a great employee. So there is options, but people have got to open and broaden their idea of what's possible and not stay with the old paradigm that, oh, it's always been everyone you can see in the office. They're diligently at their desks punching away, so they must be busy and working hard. That's not always necessarily the case.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a fascinating talk, Hilarie. I thank you so much for coming today to share your great wisdom. And everyone, please go out today and get Billions Lost. And where can they find out more about you, Hilarie?
BillionsLostBook.com.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming to Savvy Business Radio.
Thank you so much. Be well and take care.
Savvy Business Radio broadcasts worldwide via a large podcast network, celebrating business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful individuals. Find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest. Call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.